Okay, grade 10, here's lesson number 10 on the circulatory system. This is the last big body system we're going to be doing in this unit. And we'll be talking next class, we'll be doing an assignment about the heart, looking at a virtual heart dissection, and looking at the structure of the heart and how it performs its function. So today we'll be finishing up the information you need to do big idea number 3. So please make sure you have this written down. You should already have it from last lesson. Make sure you write it down. I'm going to answer it completely between last lesson's material about carbon and today about transportation. So you should have 3 to 5 bullet points or sentences to answer big idea number 3, and make sure you upload that in your notes from today's lesson. Okay, here's the Telfer today. It's a 2-pager. You're going to talk about the purpose of the circulatory system, the blood vessels, including a diagram of the 3 blood vessel types. You're going to do the heart. You need to do a drawing of the heart, or you can also just do a digital download or an image of it. But you need to make sure you have an image of it that you can analyze and study. And then we're going to be comparing some different non-humans and their circulatory systems, particularly invertebrates. Okay, so let's start with the purpose of the circulatory system. So the system is often thought of for a lot of as kind of the highway of the body. It's a good analogy. The bloodstream is how we get things around the body, a whole bunch of different substances. And we talked about a lot of these substances already in this unit. So take a minute and think about which substances can you name? How many different ones can you name? Okay, so first category, gases. We have oxygen and carbon dioxide, important for respiration. We have nutrients, vitamins, and minerals, so amino acids, fats, glucose, calcium, iron, vitamin D, all examples of those things. We'll talk about that in digestion. Hormones, adrenaline, testosterone, insulin, glucagon. Cells, like white blood cells, platelets, and red blood cells. Red blood cells are the ones that carry gases, carry oxygen around. White blood cells and platelets are blood clotting. White blood cells are important for fighting off infections. And then, of course, water and waste products both get carried around as well. So all of these things are reliant on the circulatory system pumping them around the body. So here is, so there are 3 main types of blood vessels. I'm sure you've heard of, if not all of them, most of them before. And they all have a different function, and therefore they have a different structure. So I want you to think for a minute, can you name the 3 different blood vessels in the human body? Well, they are capillaries. We talked about that for digestion and for respiration already. And then we have veins and we have arteries. The arterioles and venules are kind of branching smaller ones between a vein and a capillary, between a capillary and an artery. I'm not holding you accountable for memorizing those ones though, okay? But capillary, artery, and vein, those are the 3 main ones, the 3 you have to know. So arteries, the definition of artery is a blood vessel that takes blood away from the heart. And most of the time, that blood is high in oxygen, but not always. Okay, and it takes blood away from the heart, and because it's being freshly pumped out of the heart, it tends to be very high in pressure. Then we have veins, and the veins collect the blood from the body, and they bring it back to the heart. So any blood vessel going back to the heart is going to be called a vein, and that blood tends to be very low in pressure because it's been a long time since it was at the heart and been pumped. And the blood in the veins tends to be low oxygen, but not always. There is an exception to this rule. And the last one are the capillaries. The capillaries are the very thin and they're kind of net-like blood vessels. And this is where gas exchange happens on the alveoli, where nutrient exchange happens in the small intestine. It's all over the body, at the kidneys, your brain has a ton of them, muscles have them, they're all over the place. Anytime things are coming in and out of the bloodstream, it's going to be through a capillary. Okay, so this entire unit we've been talking a lot about structure and function, and I can guarantee your unit test will have questions about structure and function. So let's look at structure and function in the blood vessels. So how does the structure of these different blood vessels allow them to perform their function? So here's a cross-section of an artery, a vein, and we have a capillary here. You don't need to know all these names, but you can look at the image what they look at here. And then here's another image showing how they connect. So take a minute, pause the video, and think about how does the structure of them allow them to perform their function. Well, arteries, if you notice, have a very thick wall, muscular lining, and that helps them cope with a high blood pressure. With the blood in the arteries coming directly from the heart, it's going to be under high pressure, and we don't want the blood vessels to stretch too much. So we have these muscular parts of the arteries that allows them to have that flexibility to absorb that high pressure. Veins have much lower pressure. It's been a long time since it was pumped from the heart. It's gone through the arteries, through the capillaries, and now into a vein. It's been a long time it's been pumped. So they can have a much thinner wall because of that. They also have these one-way valves, which means that blood can flow in this direction through the valve, but it can't flow backwards. And this is really important because you're spending this energy from the heart pumping blood up towards the heart, usually up. It can be down from the brain, of course. And we don't want to lose the energy and have gravity pull the blood back down. So you think about your leg. Whenever your heart beats, it's pumping blood in your arteries down towards your toes and then back up again in the veins. Now, between heartbeats, those little spaces of time between heartbeats, there's nothing pumping the blood. So you don't want the blood in the veins to just fall all the way back down again. That would be a horrible waste of energy. So we have these one-way valves that stop it from going backwards. Capillaries are very thin, much, much smaller, and they tend to be about 1 cell thick, very thin, and this is so that way things can diffuse in and out across their membranes very easily. So any kind of matter coming into, whether it's a hormone, it's gas, it's a nutrient, anything coming in and out the body of water, it goes through a capillary really easily. Okay, let's talk about the heart. The heart is a really cool muscle. So mammals have what's a 4-chambered heart, and they all have very similar hearts. So if we were to dissect a heart in person, which I would love to do with you guys, and if you take biology in grade 11, you will definitely dissect a heart. The heart size is really relevant to body size of the organism. So a cow has a huge heart, whereas a sheep has a much smaller heart, and we have one kind of in between. So why do you think that is? Well, hearts had to pump the blood all around the body. So the bigger the body, the bigger the pump has to be. And the heart is just a very muscular pump. The best way to kind of think of it is not just one pump, but it's a pair of pumps. It's 2 pumps, and each pump has a collection chamber where it's going to collect the blood, and then a pumping chamber that's more muscular. So the collection chambers are the atria, the right atrium and the left atrium. And the pumping chambers are the ventricles, the right ventricle and the left ventricle. Now, I know you're noticing now that the right is on what's the left side to you and the left's the right side to you. These are what we call anatomical directions, which means that they show the direction relative to the specimen. So if this was a heart of an organism kind of laying on the table, this is its left and its right, so we call it by that direction. That way, no matter where you're looking at it from, everyone uses the same left and right. It's the left and right of the organism of the specimen. So the atria collect the blood, the ventricles pump the blood. Now these 4 valves, the 4 chambers, are divided by valves. So we have these little openings between the chambers called valves. One here between the right atrium and right ventricle, one here between the left atrium and left ventricle, and then one from the right ventricle out, okay, up in here, and one from the left ventricle out, up in here. So those valves control which blood is where. Here's kind of a bottom view of the heart and the 4 valves. We have the tricuspid valve and the mitral valves. Those ones go between atria and ventricles. And then we have the aortic valve and the pulmonary valve. Those go from the ventricles out to the lungs in this case and out to the whole body in this case. The reason why we have 4 chambers is it helps prevent the blood being mixed and keeps it very efficient. So when you have a heartbeat happening, it's going to be very efficient in the way it uses that energy to pump blood around the body. Your heartbeat has 2 parts, right? The first part is kind of a da-dub, right? The first part, boom, 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 boom. The first part is where you're going to have the heartbeat affecting the top part, the atria, allowing the valve to open the blood to flow down to the ventricles. The second one is bigger and it pumps the blood from the ventricles out to the lungs in this case, or from here out to the whole body. Okay, and by doing this double pump, it keeps the oxygenated blood on this side, and the deoxygenated blood on this side. They don't get mixed because they're separated by this muscular layer right here called the septum. Okay, so here's a diagram of the heart. Let's kind of talk through what's happening here. You need to have this in your notes. It's really important. You can choose to draw it, or you can choose to print it, or you can choose to download it if you're doing digital notes, but you need to have this in your notes, okay? So if we start with the bloods coming in the body, it's going to enter through the veins, superior and inferior vena cava. Those are veins. And remember, veins are any blood vessel going to the heart. And they're going to bring in deoxygenated blood from the whole body, and that enters the right atrium. And atrium, remember, are collecting chambers. Collects the blood. Nothing's really happening there. It's kind of gathering before it can be pumped down to the ventricle. The first heartbeat happens. The tricuspid valve here opens, and that lets the blood in the right atrium flow down into the right ventricle. The right ventricle is very muscular, and then the next heartbeat, it pumps. The pulmonary valve opens, and it goes out through the pulmonary valve to the pulmonary artery. Remember, arteries move away from the heart and takes that low oxygen blood to the lungs. One on the left side, one on the right side. And then the two lungs will then have gas exchange, which we already talked about, and we'll have the carbon dioxide in the blood leaving and the oxygen entering the blood. After that, the blood comes back to the heart from the lungs. So on this side, the pulmonary veins, and here two other pulmonary veins, it will enter the left atrium from each lung on both sides after having gone through capillaries. And now these are arteries. Veins. Veins go to the heart. So even though these ones have oxygen rich and most veins are oxygen poor, this is the exception. Just like most arteries are oxygen rich, the pulmonary artery is the exception. It is oxygen poor. So veins go to the heart. The pulmonary veins go into the heart from the lungs, into the left atrium. That blood collects there. And then once it collects, that is the first dub of the heartbeat, the boom, 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 the first one, the mitral valve opens. That blood flows down the left ventricle. This is the most muscular part of the heart. The left ventricle collects that blood, and the next heartbeat, the second part of your heartbeat, the second beat, will then open the aortic valve, and the blood flows out the aortic valve, out the aorta, and around to the entire body. So this kind of diagram here kind of shows the two parts of this system. So we have all the blood coming in from capillaries to veins into the heart. That's low in oxygen, right? Blue is a color code that means low in oxygen. So it enters the heart in the atrium, the ventricles on the right-hand side. Then it goes to the lungs in what's called the pulmonary circuit. The lungs is a pulmonary circuit. And then it's going to get oxygenated and goes back to the heart, the pulmonary vein right here, into the left atrium, down the left ventricle, and then back out through the aorta to the whole body. Back to the capillaries, being used at your muscles, your intestines, wherever it's being used up. They take in the oxygen, give up carbon dioxide, and it goes back again. So when it's in every part of the body except the lungs and the heart, that's called the systemic circuit. It's in body systems. When it's at the lungs, the pulmonary circuit. And the idea is the first half of the heart focuses on the pulmonary circuit. The second half of the heart focuses on the systemic circuit. Okay, so you need to write down notes about what I'm saying here. There's no bullets for you to copy. You have to write down what has been said, the key information here. Okay, so to kind of test yourself, here are 6 steps for blood flow in the heart. They are not in the right order. So I want you to pause the video and put these in the correct order. You're welcome to work with a classmate, talk it through with somebody. It's always helpful. Pause the video, put these in the correct order. Okay, so hopefully now you try to put all 6 in order for yourself. And here is the correct answer. So first step is number 3. Blood enters the right atrium through the superior and inferior vena cava. Then we have it goes through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. Step number 1 was next. Then step number 6, then blood then flows to the lungs, to the pulmonary valve, into the pulmonary arteries where it will be oxygenated. Step number 4, the freshly oxygenated blood then returns to the heart through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. The blood flows through the mitral valve into the left ventricle, the most muscular chamber of the mammalian heart. And then number 5 is last. The blood then exits the heart through the aortic valve and the aorta to return to the body. Okay, so you need to be able to put those steps in order. Biology involves memorization, right? So make sure you study these different steps. I would look at applying them as well in next class with your dissection analysis. Okay, so that's enough about human hearts and mammalian hearts. Look at some other hearts as well. I don't want you guys to be so focused on human physiology you don't learn anything about other organisms as well. So vertebrates we can talk about vertebrates versus invertebrates. So vertebrates are organisms that have a backbone, which the name really kind of makes sense with vertebrae, means the parts of our spine. So vertebrates have a backbone, and a lot of the things you think of when you think of animals are going to be vertebrates. So mammals are vertebrates, fish, reptiles, birds, amphibians. Here are some examples of vertebrates. Okay, and then invertebrates are ones that don't have a backbone. So things like worms, jellyfish, mollusks, like snails and bivalves, insects, sponges, slugs. Here's a whole bunch of different invertebrates. And these two groups tend to have very different circulatory system. All vertebrates do have a closed circulatory system, like the one we just studied, where there's closed blood vessels, there's a heart, and it's separate and completely closed off from the muscles and other parts of the body. But most invertebrates have what's called an open circulatory system, like this one here in this grasshopper. So we have a tubular kind of a heart here, and the blood flows around the cell. So if you look here, here's their heart. Everyone needs a pump to pump blood around. But in this case, the blood vessels, they just go into the body cells. And then some collect the blood and it goes to the heart. And when it comes out of the heart, it just goes back and distributed again. So it's kind of open and like a pool of blood almost, which is why if you think squish an insect, you see lots of gross stuff because all that stuff is very open inside of it. So there are pros and cons to both of these systems. You'll notice that most of the organisms that are invertebrates and have a system tend to be a lot smaller in size than vertebrates because they're keeping all of these fluids together in their bodies. Okay, I also want to show you some other hearts. So we talked about the fact that mammals have a 4-chamber heart and all mammals have a very similar heart, but there's lots of other kinds of hearts that exist. So birds also have 4 chambers, but they have very small atria compared to how big the ventricles are. Here's a fish one that's also going to have atria and ventricles, but very different structure. An amphibian has 2 atria, but a single ventricle, so very different as well. And the most different is a spider, has like a tube type heart. But they all need to have some sort of pump to pump the blood around the body. Okay, so that's today's lesson. Make sure you upload images of all your notes from today and include your page of big idea number 3. Next class, you can expect an assignment about a heart dissection, analyzing it virtually. We'll find a virtual lab for you guys to do and analyze, get some investigation data going. Okay, well, I hope this was informative for you, and if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me, and hope everyone's staying home and staying safe. Take care, guys.